Hi folks, you're with us today, Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, well, I guess is democracy already dead? We just don't know it. It was quietly taken out back and shot, but we still haven't quite worked it out yet. Or does the definition of democracy, has it shifted so far away from what we once perceived it to be, or what it once was, that it's already being diluted to a point where it ceases to be relevant in how we select our governments. Now, whether that's by doing fake ballots or making sure that the contenders that stand for the election are all globalist controlled or whatever devices are. But the interpretation of and the definition of democracy appears to be, well, not appears to be, it is changing in the minds of many. Now, I ended up having a conversation a few days ago with some people who are they're teachers and they're organisers in the teachers' union. So they're at the cutting edge of leftist globalist type attitudes. They're the unwitting leftist foot soldiers that the globalists are using to undermine and destroy Western society, and before long they too will be discarded once the globalists don't need them anymore. Right now they're handy, but talking about their definition of democracy. Now it came up because just a bit of background for people who aren't from Australia. There's going to be a vote, a referendum actually in Australia later this year. In fact, it's in a few months' time, where the people are going to vote on an amendment to the Constitution to include a special constitutional body or representative body that is made up uniquely of and only of Indigenous Australians, the Aborigines that we. So, and this is going to be a special parliament that they will have, and they will be able to advise on any and all issues that they allege, without needing to produce evidence, that they allege somehow affect the Aboriginal people. Now, the body that will represent this parliament, this Aboriginal parliament, that will be enshrined in the Constitution, assuming the referendum gets up, they're not elected themselves, so they're not democratically selected. So it's a bunch of Aboriginal race grifting elites that are going to be in control of this, and will be able to vote themselves all sorts of very lucrative programs to help line their pockets and turn the ones that are already multimillionaires into multi-gazillionaires. So the latitude for, in my opinion, the latitude for corruption and perversion is considerable. Now, on top of that, the wording certainly that I've seen is very vague. So we're going to see lots of opportunity for race grifting, NGO-funded lawyers to expand the powers, using activist judges and so on, expand the powers of this parliament, or this Aboriginal parliament within the Constitution, to the point where they have virtual or effective veto powers on government policy. Now, if we look at the so-called treaties that are made in say other places, where like in New Zealand or Canada or parts of the United States, with the local Indigenous, say Indian tribes, things like that, I don't see it's worked well anywhere, or not that I can see. Was it as bad as some of the more apocalyptic visions have presented? Well, not really. Was it in any way helpful or good, or did it further then I don't think so either. If anything, it's a negative move, but it's unnecessary. But it gives 2 votes instead of 1 vote to the local people, and divides us by race, saying, well, okay, you folks here have got your own little parliament, then does that mean that white folks, and so we've got our parliament? But no, it means it dilutes white influence and increases the influence of others. Now, given that in Australia and elsewhere around the Western world, white influence is already screaming downhill at a rate of knots, because you have vast numbers of people coming to Australia now, Indians, Chinese, and so on, Middle Easterners, the list goes on, that have no intention of integrating and want special pleading and special dispensations and special handouts for their genetic diaspora, and are demanding that, often at the expense, well, not often, it is at the expense of the white people that live in Australia, or certainly the white non-elites that live in Australia. And so I see this as unhelpful. Anyway, that's sort of the backdrop. Now, there was some activists and spruikers running around promoting the vote for, saying, well, if you vote for this, that means you're voting for human rights, you're voting for equality, you're voting for good. But if you oppose it, then you're a fucking Nazi. So that's really the gist of where they're going with. So these activists were out waving it, and these two people, or I had a kid in tow, two people came up and said, we can't believe that anybody would disagree with this. Equality, equity, you know. And they didn't really produce arguments for it, but said that anyone who didn't do it was a racist, fascist, Nazi. So it's the usual sort of thing. But they this was outside like a strip of shops, and probably 10 minutes later, I was in another shop, and they happened to walk in as I was walking out, and I bumped into them, and so I thought, no, I can't let this opportunity pass. So we ended up having a chat outside, and I ran on like this. I want to know their views so I can dutifully report it here on online. But they had I put forward the idea that anyone that disagreed with this proposition was a fascist, and they, yes, that's right, fascist, probably Hitler. And then they embraced me as a fellow traveller, you know, group hug, group moral hug, ideological hugging. So I then said that, or put forward, well, look, you know, if it's a referendum, the people have a right to decide. So, you know, the thing about democracy is that people get to choose, and it means that sometimes the outcome is a verdict I don't like or don't agree with, or hope hadn't happened, but when it does, it's the will of the people, and that's a good thing. We have the will of the people rather than a dictatorial elite. And they were aghast at this. Well, no, that's not right. You know, you poor man, you deranged idiot. If people vote for this race hustling grift, then that's democracy. That is democracy. But if people vote against it, that's populism. Populism is fascism. Well, wait a minute. Hey, hold on. You mean the same people voting, but if they vote for what you want, then that's democracy. If they don't vote for you want, it's not democracy anymore, it's populism. Yes, that's right. We can't allow populism. We can't allow the fucking fascist, fucking Nazis to take over, because that's what'll happen. We have to fight back. We have to limit democracy so they only vote the way we want them to, because if they don't, populism, because it's fascism, Nazi, and then there'll be Hitler. And you go, holy fuck, are these people that deranged? Well, yes, they are. And they sincerely believe that only when people vote for example, you know, so, oh, you mean like populism, like if they vote for Donald Trump? Yes, Nazi, Hitler, but if they vote for, you know, Joe Biden in a rigged election, or you know, then that's, well, what do you think about all the suppression of information and things like that? You know, the Hunter Biden, they're Nazis. So they think any election rigging or anything at all, any lies that are told, the propaganda are told in a good cause, because that'll make people vote in the way they're supposed to. But if they get the truth and accurate information and unbiased information and non-propaganda, they may not vote the way they're supposed to, and that's populism. So, well, isn't it populism if you have to tell lies to get elected? No, that's now democracy. So the whole definition of democracy is shifted in their view. They now say it's only democracy when you vote the way you're supposed to. And if any lies they tell, any untruth, any propaganda, any deceit, anything at all is acceptable if you can get people to vote the way they're supposed to. But the idea that people can vote any other way, you know, without that sort of in effect coercion, then it's populism, which means fascism, because they're not voting the way they're supposed to. They're the great unwashed. They're the non-elites. They're the uneducated ones. They're the shit on our shoes, and they shouldn't really have the vote. But given they have the vote, we just have to make sure they vote the way they're supposed to, and that's how it is. And anyone who disagrees with that is Hitler. So this is an insane sort of stage that we've got to. Now, these people would have been, I don't know, early 50s, I suppose. And yet these were the views they held. Now, it's true they'd be better educated than most. I mean, they're teachers, for fuck's sake. So, it's not a high threshold. So having a look at this, these are the people teaching and brainwashing our kids. These are the people who, and they're not alone, who believe that democracy isn't the people voting to decide. It's coercing people to decide or to vote in the way that they should, and to doing anything and everything you have to prevent them. Now, I sort of raised the issue of, well, what about say, using COVID as a cover to create fake ballots to make sure certain candidates win elections, and that the candidates you don't like. Well, according to them, that's quite acceptable, because you're not really corrupting the vote. It's not really affecting clean and fair elections, okay? Because you're making sure that the approved people win, and therefore that's a good thing. So democracy is not about, because if the people decide, they may decide in the wrong way. You can't have that. It's just simply not acceptable anymore. And so they're quite happy to have a dictator that pushes, that enforces, the idea of, say, you lock down people who have views against mass migration, and you deny them bank accounts, or you shut them out of the public square if they're not allowed to speak, or shut down their social media account. That's quite acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that, because you're doing the right thing. Therefore, that's okay. But isn't that illegal? Because you're treating people one way and there's two sets of laws. But that's all right, because with two sets of laws, you can use those laws to target people you don't like and shut them out of the public square, and that's good. That's a good thing. But isn't it anti-democratic? No. Democracy means populism. If you let it sort of function as it's supposed, it means populism, and that means fascism, and that means Hitler. So we have to stop. So that their connection with people being allowed to vote and choose is only one step removed from Hitler. And look at Trump. What did Trump do that's like Hitler? Well, everybody knows. No, I don't. What we do? Oh, I can't think of anything straight away. Oh, well, I'll wait while you look up on your iPhone or something like that. Oh, I haven't got time. Don't know. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Are you Hitler? So those are the way. That's the way. But I was surprised. But it's not the first time I've heard these sentiments that if the people actually get to choose, it's populism. But if they can be controlled and brainwashed, and even if you've got to rig the election, it doesn't matter. But as long as the outcome is what it's supposed to be, then that is now democracy. So we've gone through an interesting period where, with the very definition of democracy, and it's been redefined by the globalists, the very definition of democracy has changed. That the people who don't agree with mass migration, or for example, who don't agree with mass migration or think climate change is a load of bullshit, then they should not be allowed to vote or have a decision, because they're just guilty of wrongthink. And if those people are allowed to decide outcomes, then it'll be populism. So democracy is actually, the definition has actually changed. We live in scary times, because no one's really pushing back against this. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.